shame that I didn't go to it earlier when I heard such good things about it. Ted Lasso.
Oh.
Watch Ted Lasso? Oh, dude, you gotta watch. It is an example of just, hey, you can be really good and it's not fun. Like, there's a better option, and the option usually is be the better person. You can get frustrated, you get angry, you could.
Okay. Got vision.
Here we are.
I can hear you.
I'm just dropping stuff now. Sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
We can hear you perfectly, Karen.
Cool.
We've got it going.
Sorry about that. I don't know what was happening.
This is me. I'm Josh.
Hello, Josh.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
I had all these devices going, 3 of them.
Notifications going off everywhere. Bing, 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 bing.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm on the iPad now, so that should work. That should be fine.
Very good.
Wonderful. And you're in Canberra now?
I am. How are you, Aidan?
I'm good.
It's so good to see your beautiful face.
Yeah, yours too. It's been I think it's got to have been, we did a 10-year reunion. I think it's probably about 15 years since you and I have been in the same room.
Oh, I know. Well, I'm like an old grey-haired grandma now.
So
shock to you.
So you're working at the portrait gallery? Is that right?
I've been there. I'm just turning up my sound.
Yep.
I've been there for the better part of a decade.
Really?
Yeah, it'll be at the end of this year it'll be a decade.
Oh wow.
So what is the portrait gallery?
Sorry?
What's the portrait gallery? I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, it's the National Portrait Gallery.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Situated in Canberra.
Yeah.
Next door to the National Gallery of Australia.
Okay, so the short form of just the portrait gallery, I'm thinking, is it a silhouette place? They cut out with just silhouettes and.
No, it's just portraits, pictures of the great and the good and the infamous, people that have had an impact on Australian society and culture through time.
Oh wow!
And it's actually it's a great place to work. It's been really, really interesting, and so I am the director of Access and Learning, which means I look after all the educational programs, all the public programs, so lectures, talks, art workshops, performance. I've brought a lot of performance into the gallery.
Yeah, I bet,
Yeah, come on, of course. So just kind of activating the spaces and giving people what I like to call like another lens to understand the art of portraiture or the stories of the people that are portrayed or artists.
Right.
Yeah.
And so did you have a background in that style of, like painting style art?
No.
Right.
No, I didn't. And I kind of proudly call myself an outsider. And I kind of think that helps me do my job.
Yeah.
And one of my colleagues said, "Oh, come on, you're an insider now." To me, only this weekend. And I went, no. When you say that, I have to stop because I stopped being useful.
Yeah.
And I stopped kind of having, if you like, the right overview of what we're doing and how people really see it, what audiences think. So
yeah,
it's such a strong relationship to theatre. It's amazing.
Really? What is that? Just because it's it's the emotion of people's faces, or like what?
Exactly. It's all about people.
Yeah. Okay.
It's all about how a portrait kind of tries to capture the essence of a character or a personality at that moment in time, and also tries to tell a story about what they do or what they've done or what their interests are and all those sort of things. So it's about character, but also just the way a series of exhibitions, a program of exhibitions works across a year. It's just like a theatre season. Okay. And, we have to reach deadlines, and we have to have all these different departments, people with different skills, all working together to get to opening. And then we have the run of the show.
So is there like an archive of these that you're drawing on to create exhibitions?
I beg your pardon?
Is there an archive of the portraits that you're drawing on to actually create an exhibition kind of from scratch, or is it kind of set?
Well, the collection grows all the time.
Yeah.
And so we've got a collection of several thousand works now. although the gallery's only really been, it's one of the youngest galleries in the country in terms of a national institution, or even a state institution. And we also actively commission portraits, and that's really interesting because that's when you match the subject or the sitter with an artist, and you say that's going to be an interesting combination or meeting of these two individuals and what they're going to produce. So a really famous one that we have that I think you'll like, Ado, is a portrait of Nick Cave.
Yeah.
And it's by Howard Arkley. And it's actually, Howard Arkley is an amazing artist, but he's best known for his really, really super saturated paintings of cities, like little orange boxes and houses.
Right, okay.
You'll recognize them if you see them.
Yeah.
And he doesn't do portraits, but this was actually the last painting he did before he died. And it's this fantastic, fantastic portrait of Nick Cave, which is done like using spray paint. So it's like graffiti.
Yeah.
Completely brilliant. But you can find it on our website.
Yeah. I'm sure, I'm sure Josh will find it.
We'll put some examples up as we're discussing all these works and everything, though, for sure.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Because actually,
I do a heap of theatre here. So in all my spare time, of which there isn't much, I work with other people here making theatre. So directing, acting, doing all sorts of stuff. And we've got big plans and big ambitions because Canberra's kind of behind the rest of the country in terms of the independent theatre scene.
Okay.
So the Canberra Theatre Centre here is terrific. It's a beautiful theatre, and we've got a very interesting and dynamic new director in there at the moment, just come in. But basically, they don't produce Canberra work. They're like a venue for some really great touring productions. So, the Bangara come there every year, Bell Shakespeare, come there every year, but lots of other stuff as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, they don't produce any Canberra work, but that's changing under Alex Budd. So that's a bit exciting. There's some stuff going on. But he arrived, and of course we all went into COVID. So
yeah,
he's just trying to hit his straps now.
That would have been some downtime for you guys, obviously. So did you use that a bit productively and think of, okay, let's brainstorm some future projects and maybe get ahead of the schedule there?
Well, look, totally. Yeah. We did that dreaded word, the digital pivot, but I've been, which everyone's using, but I had been working on digital education programs and digital live streaming and stuff for a long time. We called it the Virtual Excursion Program, and we've been working on that for about 5 years. So what that enabled us to do was to very quickly make an adjustment and to really develop that. Mm-hmm. And now we have audiences, and we're still working with them. We have people that have been tuning into us for months now, and it's roughly 60 people every time we do a program, which is pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
And, one of those people is an expat who lives in Sweden. She gets up at 2 a.m.
That's wonderful.
See some Australian art. Yeah. It's really cool. And this other guy that lives in the bush, he's a farmer. He's also a painter. So he comes every week without fail. And actually, he entered the Archibald. And so when he went to Sydney to take his painting to Sydney, I don't know if he got in. I don't think he did, but never mind. He came via Canberra to visit. It's incredible. So we've got this audience of people. And that's really fun.
Well, that format has given a lot of people that chance to maybe see this work they wouldn't have had to, and hopefully we don't draw that back when everything sort of does normalise a bit. It'd be a bit of a shame if we just sort of don't keep that other pathway open.
Look, I know, and that's what we're doing now, because really Canberra's pretty one of the safest places in the country. We're very lucky, and we're completely open and unmasked, and actually a bit complacent. We have to be a bit careful, but we're open. People are rushing in to see exhibitions and what have you. Yeah. Now it's been really, really busy. And, but we are still maintaining this digital perspective, because that is right. We can reach people who otherwise won't be able to come.
I mean,
And the people with disability or confined to homes, or, you know, the elderly, or we for a long time have been reaching out into the Canberra hospital school. So we go into the hospital school for kids, and that's really special because they have such a awful time.
yeah.
They hate going to the hospital school.
I
And
mean,
they're the kids that are there for, you know, quite a long time,
Yeah.
you know, 4 or 5 weeks and more.
yeah.
So popping in to see them and doing some stuff every few weeks is really cool.
I must
And getting
admit, though,
to make some of us. Yeah.
when I've had
And we just-
experience of going to Westmead Children's Hospital, like for a
Yeah.
hospital though, it's a marvelous place to go. I was just like, why can't all hospitals
Why can't adults
have this
hospitals be like
vibe?
that?
It's a wonderful place. There's artwork everywhere. There's
Yeah.
energy. There's energy, even though it's a place that is serious.
I will say
Serious
though
things are
as well,
happening.
when because
Very-
when I broke my leg at the beginning of last year, the year gone before, and there was a brief period where I thought I was about to. I'd gone to the hospital to just have my leg looked at by the surgeon in order to get my final cast and do the whole thing. And
Yeah.
as soon as I went to chat to the orthopedic surgeon, he sort of took one look at my leg and went, "Oh, we may end up operating today." And
Gosh.
I'm someone who's
Yeah.
very nervous about operations. I really don't like them. And I'd gone there alone because I thought it was just going to be a normal trip. And I remember I was going through the corridor on my crutches and I was on the verge of tears, and those kind of, you know, the kind of panic attack tears where you're sort of going, I'm not capable of dealing with this right now. Like, I need my mum, I need something.
Yeah.
And I was going, I need anything, just anything. And I looked on the wall and there was a painting from a gentleman, Uncle Bundaluk, who's one of the Indigenous, and he was the first Indigenous man of the Blue Mountains who really sort of took me under his wing and started teaching me about culture. Really great, Darug, and I think he might have been Gundungaran as well. But,
Yeah.
you know, someone who was a really important person in my sort of teenage life. And all of a sudden there's this big painting of his on the wall. And I remember I took a photo of it and made a post about it because I kind of went, this is what I needed. Like, I needed that sort of spiritual thing to sort of go, you know, have heart. And I
You're
think
gonna
that's what the art and music and just livelihood in hospitals kind of does. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, what I found is like transferring from one art form to another and back again. And it's the same language, basically. It's just a different medium.
yeah,
And we're all trying to do the same thing, and just make people feel more at ease in the world. And that's where portraiture is great, you know, because it's like, I kind of see it as like a gateway art form.
yeah,
We can all look at a portrait and go, is that a good portrait or a bad portrait? We can make a judgment. We feel confident because we understand, you know, who's being portrayed. We might know
Yeah.
them from history, or we might even have met them or seen them on the telly or whatever. And we can make that judgment call. And you feel confident then about looking at art and then saying, well, why do I like it? Or why do I think it's really bad? Why is it crap? And in a way that sometimes when people go to next door to the National Gallery and they see some white on white painting, they just don't know where to begin. And I don't blame them, you know, because they feel like they're not really admitted. Like, they have to have some body of knowledge and expertise in order to appreciate. Portraiture isn't like that. It's very democratic, I think. And that's why I love it, because it speaks to everyone in a really
there's a little fact that I saw today, and it, you know, oddly enough, popped up on my phone. But that at one point they actually took, so, you know, Hitler painted landscapes, and he was very into art, right? They gave a whole bunch of his artworks to a modern art critic, and didn't tell him who'd done it. Just said, you know, can you analyze this? And what he basically came back with was, he said, well, whoever painted them has quite good technique, quite a good eye, not a bad artist, but doesn't seem to really care about people, judging by the way that they're painted in the artwork. And, yeah, which I think is kind of
weird. There's some book, like all these dictators that had, you know, art practice, like their kind of their thing. And Hitler wasn't the only one.
No.
It was, I'm a bit shocked.
So
but anyway,
now that we're talking about that, though, I sort of feel,
well,
like, they couldn't possibly be portrait artists that are any good, because I feel like there needs to be a level. Like we were talking with Dave Eastgate, one of the guests on a previous show, about the difference between someone who's, you use the term artist or, a creative person. The difference between them and someone that wants to be famous is, both of them want a reaction from the people that are sort of viewing them. But the artist and the creator genuinely cares about what that response is and wants it to be a positive response. And when it's a negative response, wants to understand why it's a negative response. There's a level of empathy that needs to sort of travel between the two that, I'd got to presume that if any of the dictators, were to paint a portrait, that empathy would be missing.
I think it would. I think you're right. Yeah, look, I think all art is ideally is a conversation, not a not just a statement about which you just go, well, yeah, you get it or you don't. I'm superior. That's not actually what it's about.
Yeah.
It's a bit unfortunate, actually. I think art also has that area that if I don't get it, or it's not for me, or I don't get it, and but you said before, it's the question of what goes into this. What are they trying to communicate here? And these aren't heavy, high ideal things. These are pretty common questions that one can, even without an art critic background, go, okay, well, what are they trying to do here? Maybe, okay, it's a blank piece of white canvas. Well, what's going on here? There's too many things. And like you're saying, the portrait is a very human connection. I know what a face is. I can have this very intimate bond, and I'm like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, well, look, from birth, we are hardwired to make sense of faces.
Yeah.
Some of us are better at it than others for all sorts of different reasons.
I mean, definitely.
Yeah. But it's still hardwired. We get it. And so there's a new portrait that we've just put up, which is great, which is a portrait of Hugh Jackman. And so that's proving very popular.
Yeah. Hugh.
Of course, our wonderful Wolverine.
Oh my God. No, he's looking really like Hugh. He looks like a middle-aged, lovely person.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
It's a very, it's by Vincent Fantuzzo, who's like,
oh, that's a wonderful name.
Yeah, he's the partner of Asher Keddy.
Okay.
And he's actually a very famous portrait artist in Australia. And his paintings are extraordinary, like this in almost photorealism. So people look at this portrait and think, oh, it's a black and white photo, but it's not. It's actually hand painted. It's quite extraordinary. Oh, wow. So that's attracting a lot of attention. Yeah, that was actually on the news last night, I think. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, that, isn't it? Like the more real or hyper real it is, the closer we get to familiarity of an artwork, I think people are more accustomed to it. I know that.
Yeah.
And the more abstract you get, the longer that journey goes, it gets very hard and murky. And I don't know if I want to really go there. And this is too many questions. Exactly. I'm just going to leave it to me. That's all right.
Yeah. That's not for me. Yeah. No, there's this study of stages of aesthetic development, and like there's apparently 5 stages. Most of us are between stage 1 and stage 2 in terms of our aesthetic development. So how we understand a work of art when we stand in front of it. And it's like only the most rarefied creatures are at stage 5, and they tend to be artists of extraordinary caliber. Renoir or someone might have been a stage 5. But and it's interestingly, unlike educational development, it's not related to your age or even educational opportunities. It's purely related to how much time you spent with art and how many conversations you've had in the context of looking at art. Yeah. So that's why things like photorealist paintings we look at and we go, oh, that's extraordinary. That is so real. I thought it was a photograph. That must be an amazing artist. We just make that equation, Yeah. So that's why we do that.
When I was living in the UK, I went to the I think it was the Tate Modern. I think it was.
Yeah.
With my buddy Samara Weaving, and she's a good couple of years younger than me. And there was one point where we're standing in this, and I'm looking at this artwork, and I went, I really like that. It's really cool. And she sort of stopped and looked at it, and she went, yeah, I mean, like, something really kind of Baroque about it. And then sort of walked off. And I remember sort of very condescendingly looking at her walking off and going, oh, how cute. She's just regurgitated the one word from, year 10 art that she remembers. I was like, that's really sweet. And then I looked at the little blurb and it said, heavily influenced by the Baroque period. And I sort of read that and then went, hey, Sam, and called her back over and went, did you read that? And she went, no, looked down and went, oh, yeah, true.
Yeah, look,
and then,
she's
but she started listing off the
stage
artists.
3,
and then
if not beyond. Yeah, she's at stage 3 because that's where you classify, because you have a certain level of knowledge.
But then I sort of said to her, I went, how did you know that? And she goes, oh, my mum's one of the curators at the National Gallery.
Yeah, well, actually, I was
like, okay, all right.
Worked at the National Portrait Gallery just before I got there, because I knew Samara's cousin. I mean, I know Hugo, obviously, but Samara's cousin, Harry Greenwood.
Yeah.
So Harry, I was teaching, he was one of the students at NIDA at the time. And at the time I left and said, okay, bye everybody, I'm off to the portrait gallery. He went, oh my God, my aunt's just resigned. He said, you guys would have loved each other. And
so you've never met?
I think we've met in passing, like really fleetingly at some event or something. And in fact, her name came up today. I was having a conversation with someone and her name came up positively, of course. And I said, she's someone I regret that I didn't get to work with, because I think we would have got on really well. And people always respond and say, yeah, you would have. Yeah. It's weird. It's like this missing, this person. I keep missing this person.
Well, there's still time.
And then you brought her up as well. Like, what the hell? This is weird. That's twice in one day and I don't know her.
I mean, it is a ridiculously small world too. Like, I mean, the arts within Australia, like the amount of times that I've gotten to chat to someone and then suddenly discovered we've got about 30, 40 people in common. Yeah. Because I mean, that we haven't touched on this yet, but
you've got to be nice.
Sorry?
You've got to be nice to people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Word gets around. We haven't touched on the Karen and my history, and when I arrived at NIDA, I was a 18-year-old kid.
And what, for anybody who is not familiar with NIDA, what is NIDA?
It's the National Institute of Dramatic Art, or TAFE, as my mate Jake would call it.
It's being very generous to TAFE.
He just presumes that I've always got it wrong, and I actually studied at TAFE, and I'm too stupid to know the difference.
No, I can tell. I can tell him. Your friend Jake's wrong.
So, I was this 18-year-old kid, and I show up at this awe-inspiring institution that the kings and queens of drama at my high school had auditioned 5 or 6 times and hadn't got in, and I'd somehow managed to be given sort of the keys to that kingdom. And I remember walking into my first history of theatre lecture with you, and I'd never been in a lecture. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know whether I meant to be taking notes. So much of what occurred in that lecture hall had such a big impact on me, and I know a lot of the other students as well, just of sort of getting inspired of the history that had gone before us, and feeling like we were actually going to be part of that, in that understanding the past, we were going to be able to start creating the future. And it was a really, it went from being the class that I had a lot of trepidation and a lot of nervousness about attending, because it was the academic part of the course. I know. And then it suddenly became, particularly your lectures were the thing that I looked forward to. It was where you learned that stuff.
Well, I remember one of the administrators saying to me at one point, oh, well, you're fine. Everyone loves your class. And I just went, well, gosh, that is the nicest thing you could possibly say to me, because there is no one that comes to NIDA to do history of theatre. No one. They don't come in wanting to do this stuff at all. In fact, they're either bored by it in advance, or they're cranky, they have to write essays, or they're scared of it, or there's a whole lot of things. They just don't want to do it. So the nicest thing you could possibly say to me is people seem to like it, far out. Really You'd have no idea.
I mean, I also... I was telling this story a couple of days ago to someone that I'm not sure whether you're going to remember it at all, but there was a time in one of your lectures where a young lady's phone started ringing, And it was in. You do remember this? So it was in her bag.
Yeah.
Tell the story.
And
I mean, this is also a time, I guess, where phones weren't as ubiquitous,
No, they
possibly.
But I mean, to me, it also, because from my memory, she wasn't an acting student. She was, I think, a design or like lighting design student. So, you know, when an actor's phone went off, which happened quite a bit, because I mean, we're conceited people. You know, it'd just be a thing of like, you know, I can remember like Don Contouris's phone must have gone off 1,000 times, and he'd sort of stop eating his nuts. He'd uncross his legs, pull it out of his satchel, turn it off, go back to eating his nuts like it was nothing. And, you know, everything just continued. But this poor young lady, I think, had never been the center of attention in a room that big before and started panicking. And she's struggling, and the whole time she's apologizing. And, you know, Karen had, first of all, just continued sort of driving the lecture through, but then realized how much of the room was now distracted by that. And, you know, and all of us then, once Karen sort of paused and just started watching, all of us were like, okay, now we're allowed to watch what's going on. So we watched this sort of pantomime of her struggling and apologizing and trying to get the phone out and then dropping it and finally getting it out. And then she hung it up. But instead of just hanging it up, putting it on silent, putting it back on the bag, she then continued to apologize and continue. And to the point where we all started giggling. Sure. And we're talking, how many people 90 people would have been sitting in that theatre? Yeah.
Wow.
And we're all snickering and we're all laughing. Yeah. And then my memory of it is that you literally stood, watched it for a little while, and then just went, enough. And it was like you Jedi mind tricked the entire room, because every single one of us just went, and then you just continued with the lecture. And I remember looking over at Emma Palmer, and she just had this look on her face of just like, that's the way I want to be. I want to have that amount of power. That was awesome. And it, I mean, it affected all of us. That ability to just command a room.
Well, that's just being an actor. You all do it. But in that moment, it was just like, yep, this is, we've all stopped. We've all looked. We've all paid attention. You've dealt with it. It was a struggle. And then it was just like, yeah, I just remember putting up the hand, just going, enough. And it wasn't even loud.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't, because I didn't want to upset this person any more than they were already upset. But it's just the power of a gesture. When you're the only person on stage, you know, it's funny, isn't it? But it's what we call playing the action, to just go, no, come on, I'm getting the focus now, taking it from you now, and it's back where it needs to be. Yeah. To go on with this story, whatever the story was. I don't know what I was talking about. But yeah, that is so funny. Yeah. It's sort of embarrassing in a way, because I feel, oh gosh, you know.
So Karen, you delved with the history of the art form in itself, I guess. So what would be the overview? Like, are you doing like 101, 202 sort of structure, or is it kind of, this is the main? Yeah, I'm not quite sure of like your lesson arc, I guess would be the simplest way.
That's a really good question, you know, and it was very Western theatre centric, because, you know, the time I was there, that was the sort of canon. We started to push the boundaries of that much more, and started inviting people in with expertise in various Asian theatre forms and things like that as well, to sort of augment what we were doing. Yeah. But primarily what we were trying to do was to give the students an overview of the really great moments in history that had happened in theatre art and film. We did film in another course as well. Okay. So that when they looked at a play, or they were invited to participate in something, they could kind of understand its style, its genre, and what the sort of performance elements are of that play. Yeah. And where it fits, so that they had a kind of security about how they could research as well if they didn't know, but they could recognize certain things. So a bit like Samara, when she was with Aidan, could look at a painting and say, oh, it's got Baroque elements. That's what I wanted the students to be able to do about a piece of theatre. Yeah. To be able to kind of go, I think it's from here, or I think it's that sort of period, or it's influenced by this, and I understand something about that. So that as artists, they can move into the interpretation and most importantly, actually maybe update it, maybe reinterpret it, but from a base of knowledge.
Mm.
Not from a base of, oh, I don't get this at all, it doesn't speak to me, but to say, oh, this spoke to people in, 500 BC Greece.
Yeah.
How can we make it speak to people now? And they do that from a basis of knowledge and understanding, and they can, adapt it.
Like I think when you mentioned before how powerful your class was, I think maybe Aidan said of that, it's bringing you in part of this culture, like that feeling of I'm part of something bigger than myself, and getting more understanding of that thing just heightens that, gives you this place where you're amongst that history.
I think
how powerful that
was
can be.
Sort of the biggest thing that I got out of NIDA was within my student cohort, these moments of just feeling like you were going to change the world, and you genuinely believed it. You kind of went, no, we've been given this tool. We're very inspired by that. Yeah. And I remember John Clark giving the speech that I think he probably gave to all the, graduating third years around that time, of us being his time bombs, that all of us now had the tools to be out there and make a difference. Yeah. And all of us had a different length fuse. And so long as we stay out there, and he said, and I think to his credit, a lot of us, it might not be in acting, might not even be in the arts, but we've been given a tool or a something to then go out and, do something.
Yeah, it's in classrooms all over the country with graduates, as well as on stages and in films and art galleries and all kinds of stuff. It's amazing. It's amazing I always loved that image too, Ada, of the time bombs. I thought that was quite amazing. But one of the best gifts for me was just wave after wave of students over the 14 years I worked at NIDA.
Yeah, 14.
Incredible. Yeah, and I'm a graduate myself. So, I graduated, I did the acting course too, and I finished in 1983.
Are you on the wall anywhere?
Yeah.
Where should students that are there now look for you?
Where who?
Where should students that are there now look for you on the, the pictures in the corridors? Do you have any of those?
Well, I used to be in the foot, on this kind of barrel and doing this kind of really vulgar showgirl pose. I don't know if I'm still there, but a couple of years ago I was, because a student that I know from Canberra arrived at NIDA, and that was one of the first things she saw in the foyer, and she went, oh, thank God, that's someone I know. Yeah. She took a photo and sent it to me. I don't know if it's still there, because, people change the decor, don't they? And the photos that are up and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, I was only in there last week, and I, last time I'd been in that building, the whole like 4th or 5th floor or whatever they were didn't exist.
No, I know.
The library was the top.
So long.
And it's a very different building. I mean, like I walked in expecting to see Massimo's Cafe, and and it was very different.
Yeah, I know. Well, organizations have to change or they die. I'm a great believer in change. I mean, often there's regrets about things that maybe seem to be thrown away or forgotten or whatever. But if an organization doesn't evolve, then especially in the arts, I just don't know that it can survive. So I'm not too sentimental about stuff. And, there's a lot of change happening at the Portrait Gallery too. And you sort of notice some people that are really desperately trying to hold on and resistant to change. And that's because they believe passionately in certain principles or whatever that they feel are being eroded. And there's a place for that. But somewhere there's a balance. It's kind of like you have to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And everything has time.
And I guess for you too, you've been part of that change. I mean, like, the role that you took over in the Portrait Gallery would have been done by someone else beforehand. So there's automatically a change that happens with that. Opportunity for you to experience so many things that you otherwise might not have experienced.
No, that's right. That's right. You have to. I mean, we didn't have anything digital when I arrived. I think there were sort of a few PDFs on the website, because that's also, that's how things were then. Yeah. We weren't unique. We weren't sort of behind. But I kind of looked at that and thought, there's more we can do in that space, surely. And so I think that the job is, when you move into a new position or whatever in an arts institution, that's probably true just of any institution, is accept the principles and the understand and learn, sit and look and watch what is being done really, really well. And there's always stuff that you think that's very, very good. I need to hold on to that, or at least the principle behind that.
Yeah.
And there was heaps there for me at the Portrait Gallery that was just terrific, you know, in terms of educational integrity and approach and all of those things, you know, that I inherited, you know, that have been done by other people before me. And that's great.
I mean, there's also,
at the same time, there's always going to be,
yeah.
you know, if I leave the Portrait Gallery, someone else is going to come in and they're going to do the same thing as me. They're going to say, that was good, but I don't think there's enough here. So I'm going to fill that gap. I mean, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, which I think is that's a great thing, you know, to like, have constant evolution.
Leave it alone. Don't try and, I hate the carping from the sidelines that can happen in arts organizations when people have left and they kind of go on and on about how terrible it is.
Seen that.
Fix it, you know. And I think, well, yeah, that might be true. And, you know, I do that too. You know, we're human.
Yeah.
But I actually think, you know, you've walked away, so just let people get on with it.
I mean, it's also something, though, that makes the time that you were there special and unique. Yeah, you know, it's like the experience that I had coming through, you know, being a part of your lecture theatre is a completely different experience and unique from the people that, you know, came after. You know, and there was something when you were first talking about, you know, the digital pivot, the word that, you know, we hate using. So one thing that I love that's come out of it is the fact that, you know, it's pushed people like the National Theatre over in the UK to suddenly start releasing everything filmed. And that now, you know, like one of the standard little tricks that used to happen, Josh, was I'd walk into my Monday morning acting class with how would you describe Kevin Jackson? Formidable, cantankerous, terrifying, you know,
but also
head acting teacher.
Very loving bear.
Yeah. And
you know.
and the lesson would always start the same way. He'd basically just go, he'd sort of look around the room and he'd go, so what do we do on the weekend? Anyone? And you basically had to say, I went and saw this exhibition, or I read this play, or, you know, you had to do something cultural.
You want to have something in your gun loaded, ready to go of like, hey, I saw this. You're going to love this.
I always really got under his skin because I'd be like, Mars Lounge was firing, so I just surfed all weekend, Kev. You know, he loved hearing stuff like that. But if, you know, these days you've actually got the ability to sit there and go, oh, well, I watched, you know, the National Theatre version of Frankenstein, where I had the option of watching Benedict Cumberbatch or his name's jumping out of my head, but you can literally watch the pair of them.
Johnny, something like that.
Yeah, like you can watch the pair of them back to back and see how they did the role differently. And you can sit there and I mean, the students that are coming up in the digital age now have got so much at their fingertips that I can only presume they're taking advantage of it.
Well, you know, I don't know what's happening, but you'll probably remember this, Ada, that we used to spend an entire term on Australian theatre, just on Australian theatre.
Yeah.
Right. History of that, up to, you know, as contemporary as we could get at the time. And I read somewhere, I think it was Alison Croggan, you know, she and her husband did Witness, which was this fantastic blog, because arts journalism is in deep trouble. Journalism's in deep trouble, but arts journalism in particular is cut to the bone now. And they just aren't able to sustain this blog, but it was one of the best. It was called Witness, and they've just sort of announced their resignation this last week.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things she was writing about is that no one's teaching Australian theatre history anymore. That kind of broke my heart. Because I think that more often than not, that term was the most important term for a lot of students. Actually recognising, you know, being able to research about their local hometown and the theatre company there that started, or, you know, the way in which Nimrod evolved into Belvoir and, you know, all of that stuff. So there's a kind of a sense of that legacy that you were talking about that NIDA, a place like NIDA has, and now WAPA, of course, which is fantastic, and VCA. Yeah. That sense of where they come from. And the students have are able to claim their spot within that history.
Mm.
And I think that's so important. And it does seem a shame to me if Alison Croggan, the critic, is right in saying that no one's teaching Australian theatre history anymore.
Mm.
Kind of a tragedy. But there's resources on Witness, which is going to be maintained as a sort of archive, which is good. Yeah, which is really good. So that if people want to know something, that's just another place they can go. Yeah.
I mean, it's been unfortunate, like we're saying, the benefits of the digital world we can deliver throughout the world now. Like you're saying, through COVID, we can give people the opportunity that they never had before because of scenario. Hey, we're doing this show now from where are you? You're in Melbourne. Sorry, you're in AC. You're in Canberra.
I'm in Canberra, yeah.
And we can do this. And also we can learn from examples in the UK of these talented actors to give reference to newer generations. But at the same time, it brings on the demise of other older forms that were institutions that informed the institutions now. And they are dying, but hopefully they can transition.
Like, I remember when they first started recording music, everyone was like, oh, this is the death of live music. Everyone's just going to buy it. And it's like, no, there's a different experience.
Film was the death of live theatre. TV was the death of film. But none of these things have ever come true. No. Things just have to evolve, and that's why it kind of relates back to what I was saying. If you walk away from an institution, you kind of have to give the next lot of people the gift of saying, here, this is what I've done. If you need me, contact me, but otherwise have fun.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Do something great that I never would have thought of. That's what you have to do.
That's the same thing you would have wanted to receive when you first arrived at that institution, isn't it? They kind of, we've got a safety net if you need it, but we think you'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think, though, we're talking about it in a very egalitarian way of like these institutions fall to better opportunities, but sometimes, unfortunately, though, I think the reality is they're kind of being pushed out for other reasons, and usually economic ones or things that just, it's not profitable to do the Witness now because of, we're competing with social media and other forms.
Yeah.
But what we do need a thing to take its place. And if that's not happening,
so what comes
that's a real unfortunate situation.
And arts journalism is really in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. So when you see things, first of all, you see that, newspaper criticism, critics used to be super important. And I think they actually still are of the art, because they're usually really informed commentators. And sure, they have a perspective, but you get to know the critics that you tend to agree with and the ones that you never agree with. And that's okay, because you make a judgment about whether to go to an exhibition or to a show according to that, your acquaintance with their work and their taste. And so, even if someone always writes what you think are bad reviews of good work, well, you get to know that pretty quickly. And it doesn't necessarily stop ticket sales. But now there is very little room for arts journalism, whether that be actually in the newspapers or online, like Witness was an online kind of magazine, if you like. And if that's even closing down now, you kind of wonder, well, where are those voices that are going to make that sort of informed commentary? Because they're the historians, in a sense. They look at the contemporary art practice and they discuss it. And then generations go back, and that's their primary source for understanding something, because they can't go back to that exhibition. They can never see that production if it's not stored online somewhere. And, in order for me to teach, especially Australian theatre history, I used to go to the Sydney Opera House, where there was the Dennis Wolanski Library, which is no longer, that went away a long time ago. And that had a repository of all the journalism, all the criticism that had been written about past productions. Wow. It was the most amazing resource. So I could go in there and say, I really want to teach the students about this show, because I think this play is very, very important. I know that it was done at, Nimrod 20 years ago. I didn't get to see it because I was living in Victoria at the time, but I can find all these reviews. So I can find 5 reviews about this play that these really informed commentators made. And from that, I can get a picture of what it was like, and then I can pass that on to the students. And so arts journalism is such an important resource historically, apart from anything else. It's a record.
Yeah, I think that's where our institutions, or when I say institutions, I mean some more our political structure and our sort of mainstream institutions are failing in the context of, like, you went into NIDA and you're thinking art history. Most people's assumptions are, they have an assumption and they're going in there a little bit, okay, rightio, what have you got for me, Karen? But then you show them the relevance of it. And sometimes you really do need to actually force it upon them and go, no, there is a reason for this here and there's an amazing context. And their assumptions were wrong and their expectations were wrong. And that's why it's really unfortunate now we kind of live in that circle of, if I don't like it straight away, I'm just going to move on. It's all very, I don't like it, don't need it, I won't watch it. TV, I have to wait for a week. I'm just going to watch it on a streaming service. Like, it's great. It's a great streaming, like, it's wonderful, but there's something to waiting. There's something to a body saying, no, this is good for you. You're going to sit down and unfortunately watch it and you will learn. Maybe you won't like it, maybe you will, but you got to have the opportunity.
Well, look, what I always kind of used to say to the students is like, it's great that you don't like something, but you've got to give me really good reasons why. Yeah. And until you can do that, then it's just, do you like raspberry lollies or, do you like the green frogs or the red frogs? Who cares? But if you can actually critique from a perspective of deeper thought and the knowledge that you've acquired and accumulated, and, you make a good argument, great. I mean, one of the best essays I marked at NIDA was written by a student, and I disagreed with every word he said, but he said it so damn well. He got an HD. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have those views, but they were argued so beautifully that it was very persuasive. That was kind of cool.
Well, that goes on to, I'm totally foreign to the NIDA world. Obviously, I have no background in that. And so when you do say an acting school, my assumption is kind of like maybe the TAFE comment, they're just going there, they're going to do some acting on the side, they have lunch for a bit. They're not doing art history.
So
what are you
America,
what is
like,
actually kind of, what are you doing there day to day? Give me that, because that's really interesting.
I was up on the railing doing some acting. And,
Like, is there 101 spotlight? Like, you said before, there's a lady who with the phone, and she was a set designer or something along those lines.
I think the best way to explain NIDA is every single one of the actors thinks the school is about them.
Sure,
and
of course.
That goes for whatever year they're in.
But hey, that's like, young people in general. So
it's like, no, we're the next Mel Gibson. And, and it helps when you walk through the walls and Mel's on the wall. You're like, that's going to be me one day. That's me. I'm Mel. And the women are feeling the same way about Kate. And, but the actual fact is, of the courses, there's a couple of the courses that are almost 100% guaranteed to get work at the end of it. And that's not the acting course. Like, they produce some of the best designers, the best stage managers, all the background, the people that you don't think of as being the face of NIDA. They're the guys that get out and change the industry.
So are you going in with an elective of performing arts or set design or costume?
Well,
is that like
you
an
audition
actual
for
discipline?
your specific thing of what you want to be. So I wanted to be an actor. I auditioned for the acting course. I went to the acting course. This is proving my point about the actors thinking that they're the most important
I'm just going to bring
person.
in this massive background. I've just formatted a country western scene here for you.
No, they do. They
really?
have to do.
Yeah, they got to bring something in.
The way I do my monologue, they had to. If you were studying design, you had to show up with a portfolio and with a model, and you had to explain why you'd set the play like that.
Wonderful.
And it's really hard to get in.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't matter what. Like, my I can't think of how he's related to me at the moment, but one of the guys who's sort of loosely related in my family, he just got into the design course at NIDA, and it was as big a celebration as I'd had getting in the acting course. Like, it's a thing to be proud of to go there and study. And like I say, my friends that graduated from in those courses, like Govinda and George, like, they've been running a prop house out of Sydney that's wildly successful. you know, everyone who was in those courses excelled. And that's not to say that that every single person that comes out of that acting course didn't have the ability to excel. It's just the way that we're handled in the industry is a little bit differently. Sorry, a little bit different. It's terrible English.
No, you got the point across.
But yeah, so for me as an actor showing up at the school, you've got a whole bunch of different courses. So you think about your body as your instrument. That's what you're using to express and tell that story.
Yeah.
So there's kind of the very tangible ways of improving on it, which is, you know, your voice, your physical movement. So you've got your voice in your movement classes. Then you've got to start working on your brain and what's going to be coming out of it. So you start studying improvisation. Yeah. You start, and I think where Karen sort of comes into it in the whole history of theatre is understanding your history and knowing what's come before you, and then being able to take that and use it to then sort of build that future. And I think, like, I remember someone saying to me back at the time when they were talking about the fact that Andrew Upton and Kate were taking over STC as artistic directors. And at the time, I was completely ignorant to who Andrew Upton was. You know, obviously I knew who Kate was. And then someone just said how lucky she was to have someone who was a genuine theatre auteur sort of in her corner. Someone who could actually, and I think that's what, by understanding the past, gives you a better gauge of what's good in the present and what's going to be good in the future.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think, you know, Karen's course was basically working from the inside out, and a lot of our other courses working from the outside in. You know, like I would have said kind of the perfect bookends for my NIDA experience was, you know, a history of theatre lecture with yourself, and then a movement class with Keith Bain on the opposite end, where they're kind of, and he's something, when you were first talking about the thing of the history and understanding the history of theatre in Australia, when I walked into Gavin Robbins' office the other day, and he had a picture of Keith from, I feel like it's from about the early 80s maybe. Yeah. Where he's, you know, the one where he's very much the foreground focus, and in the background you can see people doing ballet, and there's only sort of 2 or 3 couples in the background.
Yes. Yeah, I know that photo. Yeah.
And I mean, if you don't know your history, you walk in and go, oh, that's a nice looking man, and you think nothing of it. When you know your history, you see that photo and you go, that's the guy that inspired Strictly Ballroom. That's the guy that I watched Kate Blanchett jump over 15 rows of seats at STC just to give a hug. Like there's those really important people.
So privileged to learn from him.
Like I remember when I sort of came to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to make it to his funeral because I was living in the UK. I was in hysterics. You know, I was sobbing on my floor because of how much he'd meant to all of us. You know,
I know. Extraordinary man.
And if you don't know your history, you don't know those people. You know,
and you know, he means as much to the dance community as he does to the acting community.
Yeah,
that's how extraordinary he is. A phenomenal man, such a humble person, who, as a teacher, you know, was learning every day from his students, from the bodies in front of him, you know, in the most genuine way.
Yeah.
Which I think that's an extraordinary legacy. Because, you know, I think the thing that teachers don't confess to enough is actually how lucky we are, because we are learning. We're just greedy, and we're learning more and more because we're spending time with talented young people who teach us a huge amount, you know.
You might have just hit on what maybe made yourself and Keith such great teachers in my life is, by saying that, I suddenly realised that any time that I was in a lesson with either of you, there was a give and take that was occurring. And I felt a connection, you know, between, and when I say a connection, it's not just with me, it's with, you know, 120 people that were sitting in that room. But there was a genuine give and take connection happening. And when I think about the teachers that had zero effect on me, they were up there telling me.
Right.
You know, there wasn't that transfer of lack of a better word, empathy, of, of
Yeah,
knowledge
look,
coming backwards and forwards.
none of us knows everything, and knowledge and new ideas come out of the most extraordinary places, that you don't expect. And that's true when you're running a team of people like I do now at the Portrait Gallery. They're highly, highly skilled and creative, and they come up with the most extraordinary ideas. The best ideas are not necessarily going to come from the top. You've got to be prepared if you really want wonderful kind of events to happen and great experiences for audiences. You have to take the best ideas that are put on the table, and you don't give a shit about where they come from. And you've got to be open to them.
You have to take your ego out of it, don't you? You can't just be the extrovert and say, I have an idea. You have to be that listener as well. Certainly, I think
totally
when you raise up the ranks as well, it's probably even more importantly.
And you don't just ask questions you know the answers to. As a teacher, you should ask the questions that you haven't worked out yet. And then people really sort of grappling together. It's how we make theatre.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a beautiful institution, the theatre arts world, in least with regards to education there. Because you can see a little bit maybe in the academic world, there could be a bit more reservation with ideas. I do think there's still a collaborative feel, but probably coming with a bit more of and I think before you maybe selling yourself short of that, you have to learn from your students. You have to, well, Karen, that's why it makes you such a good teacher, is because you are willing to do that. That's probably not all teachers. Generally when people are in places of authority, I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And you don't, and I'm telling you what the history of art is. And you will listen and you will learn from me. Yeah. And that's one way of doing it. It's not the only way of doing it.
I'm even thinking of people that I've experienced in my working life, because I've had this sort of at times annoying thing within me that I want to challenge ideas, and I want to, particularly when it came to when I was still focused on acting, I wanted whatever I was doing to be the best that it could possibly be. So if I didn't really buy something that a director was telling me to do, I'd challenge them and try and get them to sell me on it. Mm-hmm. And I did have a few times where I ended up having to sort of pull the director away. Once on a set, I had to actually ask the AD for 10 minutes just to talk to the director because he snapped at me. And I had to pull him aside and go, no, I want this to be great. And at the moment, I don't believe in what you're telling me to do. So make me believe in it. I want to believe in it, and I want to then be able to put that up. And I think...
How did they respond?
Well, after that, we then had a really, really great working relationship. But up until that point, it had always been tense. And I think there's a definite ability that I think when you're in a position of authority or of being the mentor or the teacher, that you have to keep that ego in check of going, are they undermining me out of disrespect, or are they actually just trying to challenge what I believe?
Yeah, it's usually not that hard to tell the difference in the way that, people are behaving. But I kind of buy that, occasionally that could be a problem. And if someone is just undermining you for whatever reason, it's usually because they want your job or whatever, that they do that. Well, you do have to step on that. It's survive or be eaten, I suppose. But for the most part, if someone is genuinely puzzled or they're grappling with something you've asked them to do, you can tell that that's genuine. So, you did exactly the right thing. It's like, hang on, don't misinterpret me. I want to understand because I want this to be really great. We're after the same thing.
Yeah.
But we're speaking different languages at the moment. So we just need to, and that's cool. Because that's how the best work gets made. Yeah, I think. But look, it's funny, isn't it? Because we're reminiscing and I'm really happy to see Ado, and it's really lovely to feel that he's happy to see me. But, you know, it wasn't a fairy tale, that place.
No, I really bristled when Josh was sort of saying, so yes, I think, what was the word you used? Like lovely, and I was
Yeah,
like,
it sounded like overly, you're speaking very fondly of
I
your
think you called
memories
it
of
beautiful. And I was like, architecturally, it's a beautiful facade.
Yeah.
I was like, you know, we're talking about a place where I was once sort of challenged by a director who was brandishing a katana sword. We're talking about places
He's just
where,
pulling you into the moment, Aidan. He's just making it feel real.
Yeah, where you ended up in the fetal position in a storeroom on the mats, just crying uncontrollably.
Those cupboards, I was terrified to open those cupboards. I never knew who I was.
So was that like a deliberate exercise? We're going to make you
no.
feel...
I'm saying you get
go
to
in
the
there,
point where
this
it's
is
like
the baby room. This is where
like,
you just...
No, you just find a dark place and try and deal with the stress and the the stuff you were going. And I think it's one of those things that when I talk back to
real cauldron.
Yeah, like I say to people,
there are people that are very damaged from their experience. You know, we have to face up to that fact.
Yeah, sure.
And there's risk to be made. And
no, I'm not laughing at that. It's the unfortunate truth that it being that is just like, oh, okay, yeah.
Because it's, I mean, when I look back on it now, I'm eternally grateful that I got the chance to do it.
Me too.
But, you know, if you asked me to relive that entire period of my life again, there was so much stuff that I never want to touch again, you know? Because, I mean, the whole first year is about, like, getting to the point where you are just analyzing every sinew of what makes you you.
Yeah.
And if you're the type of person, and I experienced some of these people who basically just went, well, no, that's off limits and that's off limits and I'm cutting that off. And, you know, I'm going to explore myself to this point. And they sort of got through it without any issue. They were sort of fine. And then there were those of us that went.
But did they get through it at the detriment of them having a better performance or being better at it?
Performance is subjective.
Sure.
You know, you can watch someone who's driven themselves to nearly the point of insanity.
Yeah.
And then I'll watch it and go, yeah, that was kind of crap. I didn't enjoy that at all. And then I can watch someone like Adam Sandler, who's basically not, you know, when he's doing a comedy, he's not doing anything and it's enjoyable. Like it's so subjective.
Yeah.
And Adam Sandler's the same one that he can then do a dramatic role. Like, what was it?
Rough Diamonds.
Rough Diamonds. Yeah. And it's fucking heartbreaking. So, but I mean, for me personally, like there was people that were in my year that, you know, we actually accepted. Maybe we were just too young to know better, but we just accepted it and we went, if you want to strip us naked, we're going naked, you know, and that was, and it meant you had to acknowledge very uncomfortable truths about yourself at an age where you probably wouldn't normally be doing it. And it was then a question, like this is one of the things that, you know, I always say about one of my very good friends from the year is that, you know, some of us were given the ability to become that star and that amazing artist and all the tools to do the art and none of the tools to handle being that thing. And I think that can be the real struggle is how do you deal with all the crap that comes along with it?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because you go into the medium of what it is to be an actor, performer / celebrity or something like this thing. It is usually foisted upon people who are of a younger age and maybe don't have a history, but then you see the actors that have a lot of working history and then do get famous, like a Bryan Cranston or something like this.
Yeah, it's a much...
who handle it very well, it would seem.
Well, I think, in my personal opinion, and this is something that I'm still forming, but my feeling is that it's the people that have actually got a sense of identity which is divorced from their art form that seem to be the most successful. Whereas if...
And you mean successful in the sense of not purely the art form, but as more of a holistic thing?
In life, as in, you know, they're able to happily live a life is that ability that if your entire identity is tied up in, say, being the lead actor, you know, I'm an actor, that's what I do. The moment you're not working, what are you? You're nothing.
I know.
You know?
And there's there was that wonderful series that some young actor did in the last couple of years that was just about that, wasn't it? An Australian young, well, to me, he's young actor. I wish I could remember his name, but he's someone who found fame on television quite early. And then when that ended, he was just like thrown to the wolves. He felt like he'd been thrown to the wolves. He had no idea how to cope. And he went around interviewing all these other actors about the kind of, the very thing that you're talking about, Ada. I wish I could remember what the series was called, but it was really good. Did you see it? No.
I didn't. We'll track down what it is, though.
Yeah,
we'll throw it up as a link.
Yeah. It was very good. It was really good. And it was exactly about that. It was exactly about how you actually need the tools to be a functioning human being with a very uncertain profession, because that's what it is. And it doesn't matter how often you tell young people that they're entering an uncertain profession, because the will to be an actor is the same will that says it's not going to be like that for me. And you kind of need that to enter into it.
See, I was slightly inoculated from that, in that I remember having a thought when I first arrived at NIDA, where I looked around on the walls and I thought to myself, the only thing that's scarier than being at this school in this acting course and looking at all the famous faces that are on these walls. I mean, it's a who's who of the greatest actors that have come out of Australia.
Yeah.
The only thing scarier than those is all the people that I've never heard of. The people who had enough talent to stand where I'm standing right now, who were given all the tools that I'm being given right now. And then for whatever reason, it didn't turn into that career.
No.
You know? And you're talking about, you know, when I came through, there was, 22 of us graduated. Still talking about 22 young actors each year coming out of just that institution. And now we've got, would you say, was at least 3 comparable institutions? Would you say 4? You know, so you're talking about just over 100 actors each year.
Yeah.
And
each year.
Yeah.
Well, that's life, baby. Like, I mean, it's not certain. You can have all the skills in the world, but really sometimes it just does come down to luck.
Yeah, I mean, like some of the most talented people I've ever worked with.
The irony is to be successful. Yeah.
And then I've worked with other people who, you know, honestly, I'll never name, but you sort of end up standing in front of them going, how did you end up in this position?
Oh, look, as a teacher, you do that too. You know,
I failed that person, that pupil with a D. Like that, no, this is wrong. What's going on? Yeah. What uncle do they have?
But more often than that, I mean, yeah, sure, that happens. But more often than that, you think, whatever happened to so-and-so? I thought she was remarkable.
Yeah.
You know, where did she go? What's she doing?
But you know what, though? I reckon there's probably a really nice bookend to that, is that you think, oh, where did they go? They didn't do that thing. But if you probably found them, they'd probably be really content, possibly. Well, I mean, you know, like they've come terms with it. Maybe if they've already had that presence, that they might actually have already sort of just that little bit of extra life in them at an early age. Well, and they might come to their place of not comfort, but contentment or acceptance of what life is a bit.
Certainly that's what you hope for all of them.
Yeah. Like I do remember back when I was there, one of the things, you know, because everyone was talking about Kate and all the things she was doing. And I remember hearing, Kate Moss. I remember hearing whispers early on that people were like, yeah, but you know that in her year, like she wasn't the star of that year. Like there was an actress that was better than her, like way better. And we're like, at the time, you know, she was doing Elizabeth and she was doing this. And all of us are just scratching our head going, how can someone be better? And then we start hearing about Essie Davis and, you know, the stuff that and then we were like, well, where is she? And they're like, well, she is literally just booked in the UK doing theatre. But that's all she does, and seems very happy. And, you know, in the years gone by, she's now sort of started building that sort of, you know, you'd call the successful film and TV career.
Yeah, the mistake would be the assumption the success is a Chris Hemsworth versus someone acting on the stage.
That's the problem with the acting world. like what I was saying about when you tie your identity to being that thing, part of being an actor is how many people know you.
Sure.
You know, how many people know you as being an actor. And I remember when I was doing Out of the Blue, Clayton Watson sat there and explained to me the levels of fame. And he said, level 1 is when people in the industry know you as that thing. Mm-hmm. So, you know, for me, it was when I was graduating NIDA and starting to be there, you know, I'd be in a foyer and you'd see other people from the industry and they knew who you were and you knew who they were. And there was that kind of, you know, group knowledge. Mm-hmm. But no one outside of the industry knew who you were. Then you reach the biggest level of fame that I ever reached where, well, I kind of stepped slightly into the next, but it's the area where people just think they know you from some part of their life and they don't know when. Yeah. So you have people that come up to you and they're sort of like, and the normal thing was they'd be going like, where do I know you from? And, you'd go, I don't know. And they go, did you go to school in Wollongong? Or you're like, no, I didn't. And it'd be a long drawn out thing. And at once it really heavily backfired on me where I'd had a couple of drinks and I was out at a party and this girl comes up to me, a quite attractive girl, comes up and she goes, where do I know you from? And I went, I'm on TV. And she went, no, you know Sarah, don't you? And I went, oh, yeah. You know one of my school friends. Yeah, you know, felt like a massive douche. And I had one time where a guy actually came up to me at Coogee and he came up and he was blown away about the fact that, you know, he knew my character, he knew my name, he knew so much stuff about me. Wow. And was like, he's going to me, you know, when I knew I was coming over here, I was wondering if I was going to like run into anyone from like Home and Away or something. And to run into you, man, it's so cool. Yeah. And like post for a photo and you know, it happened once. And then from there, you know, it builds. Just bring
out there and it kind of just never happens for them. And that's mainly because, you know, they don't fit whatever the kind of idea of marketability is. And that changes all the time. That's particularly true, as here's the old feminist, for women. Yeah. You know, if you don't sort of fit a particular standard of beauty, which is usually fairly unattainable, it can
also
just
age, unfortunately, like that.
Totally. Totally. Whereas I am an actor that when I was going through NIDA, John Clark always used to take me aside and said, your best roles will come later in your life. You've just got to keep going. Because he looked at this face, he looked at this head and my personality, and I'm tall, you know, Aidan can tell you. And he just said, yeah, you're not going to. And then it was so funny because he said, look, put it this way, Karen. You're not going to play the nurse, you're going to play the matron.
The more substantive one, though, like the one that everyone remembers really.
On TV, right? And it was just so funny. But he was absolutely right, you know. He's absolutely right. Like, I get better roles now than I ever have.
Yeah.
Not that I'm not out there because I don't have enough time because I've got a big job, but...
Well, thinking about your job, Karen, I was thinking as a conversation, like, there must be times when you're walking through the hallways, no one's around, it's closed, the place is closed up.
Yeah.
And has there been or would there been or a painting that you've just sat in front of, a portrait, and just been there for time is gone, essentially, you know, like you've just, had one of those moments.
And I mean, there are some portraits that speak to me in a particular way, and it's really hard to define why. But there's one that's in a current exhibition we have called Australian Love Stories, which is a fabulous exhibition. And again, you can find it online and find out about it and see some of the works. And there's a portrait there that was done kind of mid-20th century by a female artist called Lena Bryans, who was originally born in Hungary, and she came to Australia with her family. And it's of her partner, who was an architect called Alex Jelinek. And he was a visionary kind of architect. There's not many of his buildings that are still standing, but there is one in Canberra. And it's this amazing portrait. It's a big, you can find it on the website. It's a big work, and it's bright yellow. And Alex himself is painted just with black lines. It's so simple and so fluid. And you've got this man who's looking intently at what I imagine is the architect's, sloping table. You know how they work on those.
Oh yeah, the drafting table.
Drafting table. Thank you. You just get all of this, but it's just lines on yellow, and it's powerful. And I do find it mesmerizing. I love it. And there's also a John Brack painting that I love of an art dealer. And again, it's a very graphic, very, very simple, very stark, highly colored painting. But it just emanates this kind of sophistication of the art dealer in his perfect Italian suit, Well,
that's
he's so chic. It's amazing. I love it.
It's something that when I was, I think on the one with Dave Eastgate was when I was talking about it, about the difference between, normally anyway, the difference between an intellectual and an artist is, the intellectual can tell a simple thing in a complicated way, and the artist can tell a complicated thing in a simple way.
Oh.
And the, the artworks that have always sort of just invoked that sort of feeling from me very often have been the ones that have done it simply. And it's like one of my favorite artists is Banksy, for his ability to sort of take a very simple idea, but he's the only one that thought of it, and there it is, And it's like when we were first doing some of this stuff, we were talking about favorite quotes and stuff like that.
All right.
And one of my ones is from, actually you can help me out with this. Is it J.D. Salinger or
Salinger?
Salinger. So you pronounce the G?
Yep.
Okay. And it's the one where, I'm paraphrasing, but, he says, she was standing there at the railing doing nothing, interesting that I could see, just standing there holding the universe together. Wow. And that, when you've been in that situation and, Josh is married to a wonderful woman, and I know that he's been in that situation where you suddenly, you get smacked in the face by that person. And that's exactly what it is. They're standing there doing nothing, but they're holding your entire world together.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
And I mean, kids do that in a heartbeat, like.
Yeah.
And for dogs, for me. I really like dogs.
I know. Do you remember my kids? They used to come to.
I do. That was actually something that I was going to say to Josh and I were talking about beforehand was, I wanted to try and avoid it being the
reminiscent shows.
No, the what's the word for it? It's just so often it's such a blatantly sexist comment whenever it's the woman being interviewed. It's like, how do you balance family life? But for me as a father and, a divorced, divorcee father, that's actually something that really interests me because it's such a struggle. Like for me to try and keep my career going plus have someone look after my daughter, it's... So how did you do it?
For me, my career, other than my acting and directing career, my teaching career, which has taken me through NIDA and then to the portrait gallery thus far, actually came about because I was a parent, not in spite of. And I mean by that I was, my husband left when my eldest was 3 and my youngest was 15 months. So
see, I never knew that.
Yeah. So I was a single mum. I mean, he was, he was around if I needed him. He's not a hideous person or anything.
Yeah.
He gave us the money that he could and all that stuff. So it wasn't like a disaster. But so I was very head down, bum up, if like sort of going, okay, how do I earn a living? Because being an actor is not going to cut it.
Yeah.
So I had to change course. And that's really when I came to NIDA and started working there as a tutor and then sort of gradually became, from casual to part-time to full-time. And then by the time you knew me, I was kind of well established there.
Yeah.
Running the course, I think, by the time you were there, I'm not sure. But
yeah, I think the transition was just happening.
Lee, who's fantastic, who I still stay in touch with. And he was a real mentor and really helped me too.
So
in the role.
I spoke over that. Can you say his name again? The gentleman you're
Ken
taking?
Healy,
Ken Healy.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was still there when you were.
Yeah, he was. You would. The transition was kind of happening between. He was gradually handing over the power.
Yep. Very generous, wonderful mentor. Taught me a heap. And one of the best things he ever said to me when I was going, oh my God, Ken, you just know so much. I'm doing all this research for every lecture, blah 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 blah. And he's like sort of breezing in and just talks and shoots the breeze and is brilliant. But I just went, and he said, I had 30 more years reading than you. That's the only difference. That was such a generous and wonderful thing. And, I've often said that to students ever since, like Ken said this to me and it's actually true.
Yeah.
Years on the planet, thinking about, reading about the things that you love. And then, you just have this bank of knowledge that builds up and, your duty is to kind of give that to other people.
Yeah.
Also the gift of that confidence that, you'll get that.
The reassurance that comes with an elder saying that to somebody. Yeah.
But I mean, NIDA was, at least I'm sure it's still the same now, but it was full of those people. I was just telling Maya yesterday about a time that Terence Clark just suddenly gave us an impromptu lesson on grammar that taught me more about grammar than I ever had, from any of my high school journey. There was a time when
Terry was a maths teacher.
Yeah.
In a previous,
and I mean,
as well as theatre director. Amazing.
There was also a moment when Tony Knight realised we didn't really. It was when we were doing Shakespeare. He made some comment that was sort of like an in joke about the royal family in the UK. And suddenly realised that no one had really laughed. And he went, hang on, do you guys know about what was going on in the monarchy during that? Like, do you guys know the War of the Roses? Do you know? And we sort of went, no idea. And the next lesson, I remember him walking into that at the very end of the school, not the furthest rehearsal room, but the one back that we used to do all the movement classes in.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember him sitting on there and he basically, in his surf shirt and his jeans, and he kicked off his thongs and he took this little, I think it was a rip curl cap that he used to wear, sort of took that off and rubbed the top of his head and then went, right, so in 1100 AD, and he just did this chronology of the royal family in the UK and it was out of his head. Sure. And I sat there listening to him going, how do you have this knowledge? And it was an inspiring moment, but it wasn't the only moment that I had like that in the course. Like someone like Helmut Bacchitis, like I'm going to try and get Helmut on the show at some point because.
Oh, great. Yeah.
I mean, the conversations you can have with him that, will go from a discussion about a particular animator from Russia in, a time will suddenly segue into him, dancing on stage with Tina Arena into like this. Yeah, just that was what I always said about NIDA was I felt like a lot of the other institutions in Australia didn't have the funding to give you the opportunity that NIDA did in that they'd say, this is a really important person. You should know about this person. Whereas NIDA had this ability to go, ladies and gentlemen, here is Stephen Burkoff.
Sure.
There was that type of power that it had.
I know.
I'm sure it still does.
Yeah. I think it does in the casual atmosphere for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Karen, we have taken up an inordinate amount of your time.
It's been really lovely.
It has been wonderful. Yeah, this has been fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I mean, we didn't even get into any of all the Russian translations and the Chekhov stuff. So
if a brief 5 minutes of some Russian translations, I'm sure we can do it justice.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah,
I haven't done any for a while, but yeah, that's another thing I do from time to time, but only for a specific production. Yeah, I don't just do it kind of like, I think I'll translate Uncle Vanya tomorrow.
Okay, so it is literal Russian translations for a performance or some sort of theatre. Oh, wow.
You are still fluent in Russian, aren't you?
Well, reading, but my talking is awful because it just gets rusty.
Yeah, sure.
But the reading stuff, I can do that.
I used to love just even like when we're studying Chekhov and stuff like that, when
Yeah.
you pronounce the Russian names that I was reading in the book and going, I've got no idea how that's meant to be. And then you'd say it and I'd be like, oh, okay, that's this.
Yeah, we used to have fun. We used to have fun doing that.
Those 13 consonants in a row. That's how you say it. Okay, gotcha.
Yep. More or less, Josh. Yeah, more or less.
And, thank you so much.
Is there anything you'd like to plug again, Karen, since you have this opportunity here? It's a small audience at the moment, growing fondly, but is there anything you want
good. Yeah, well, come and see Australian Love Stories at the National Portrait Gallery. And then I'm going to be performing in a production of Urinetown. Woohoo!
Oh, the musical. Okay.
Theatre Centre in September.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, I just got my script today and sort of looking at that with terror. Woo! But it's going to be fun. It's completely mad. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the next things off the block for me. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic, Karen. Well, best of luck with them. I'm sure they're going to go swimmingly. So
I hope
enjoy that.
so.
It's been an absolute pleasure once again.
And, it's been really nice to meet you and so lovely to see you, Aidan, and to talk.
Too.
It's great. And thank you for all those lovely things you said.
No, and that all of them are genuine. Like you had a great effect on not just me. I think, all the students that came out of that institution under you.
You're shaking their heads and just going, nah. You kidding? Come on. Yeah.
No, he said he was very excited before the episode today. Yeah, he was looking forward to it. So
yeah, it was.
It was certainly truthful, Karen.
Come to Canberra. Let me know if you ever do.
Yeah, no, I definitely will.
I mean, there's the National Museum, there's the National Gallery, there's the National Film and Sound Archive, there's the National Portrait Gallery. It's actually quite an amazing place.
This is the heartbreaking thing. The last 4 times I've been to Canberra, it was for summer nats. So it's...
Hey, it's going to shake my head. But, you are someone who has the versatility to move between summer nats and the National Portrait Gallery. I have faith. You can do that. You can do that, and that's good.
I think I'll have to do a trip to Canberra.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Karen. You just hang up on your end and we'll deal with it. And it's been fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much.
Bye.
Have a good night, guys.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.